I'm Janice Cummings, and I'm glad to be here with you today in Mark chapter 9, verses 14 through 29. I'll be reading from the Message. I hope you'll grab a Bible and join me. When they came back down the mountain to the other disciples, they saw a huge crowd around them, the religion scholars cross-examining them. As soon as people in the crowd saw Jesus, admiring excitement stirred them. They ran and greeted him. He asked, "What's going on? What's all the commotion?" A man out of the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought my mute son, made speechless by a demon, to you. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, grinds his teeth, and goes stiff as a board. I told your disciples, hoping they could deliver him, but they couldn't." Jesus said, "What a generation, no sense of God. How many times do I have to go over these things? How much longer do I have to put up with this? Bring the boy here." They brought him. When the demon saw Jesus, it threw the boy into a seizure, causing him to writhe on the ground and foam at the mouth. He asked the boy's father, "How long has this been going on?" "Ever since he was a little boy. Many times it pitches him into fire or the river to do away with him. If you can do anything, do it. Have a heart and help us." Jesus said, There are no ifs among believers. Anything can happen. No sooner were the words out of his mouth than the father cried, "Then I believe, help me with my doubts." Seeing that the crowd was forming fast, Jesus gave the vile spirit its marching orders. "Deaf and dumb spirit, I command you, out of him, and stay out." Screaming and with much thrashing about, it left. The boy was pale as a corpse, as people started saying, "He's dead," but Jesus, taking his hand, raised him. The boy stood up. After arriving back home, his disciples cornered Jesus and asked, "Why couldn't we drive the demon out?" He answered, "There is no way to get rid of this kind of demon except by prayer." Now, we saw in the passage right before that Jesus and Peter, James, and John are up on the mountain, and Jesus is transfigured before them, and they come back down the mountain, and there's a crowd around the disciples. And so Jesus wants to know what's going on, and so this man speaks up, this father speaks up and tells him that he's brought his son with a deaf and mute spirit to them to see if they could help. And what faith that father had when coming to Jesus. It was interesting, though. Did you notice what it said about the crowd? The crowd, it said, when they saw Jesus coming, they looked on him with stirring excitement. I just find that interesting, admiring excitement. And it also says, in other versions, it says they were greatly amazed or overwhelmed with wonder when they saw Jesus. You know, what was it that elicited such a response about Jesus? What was it about him that caused them to respond like that to him? Well, I wonder, how do we respond to Jesus? Are we stirred by excitement? Are we overwhelmed with wonder when we look at him? Or do we see him as a safety net? I think it's worth examining. Well, the father comes to him and says, "My son has a deaf and mute spirit." You know, I don't know about you, but I don't think I've seen any demon-possessed people. But I think in order to tidy up our existence and put a bow on it and make it nice and neat, sometimes I will call something one thing when it really is another. And maybe I've missed demon possession by doing that. I think it's worth taking a look at. Another thing, it says the disciples couldn't drive this spirit out. And so Jesus responds with, "Well, what a faithless generation." And so who's he talking to? Is he talking to the father, the crowd, the disciples? Who's he talking to? And then he says, "Bring the boy," and they bring the boy. And as soon as the spirit sees Jesus, he throws the boy on the ground, and the boy writhes in agony and foams at the mouth. And what a stark contrast between this crowd that sees Jesus with this admiring excitement, and then this demon that sees Jesus and throws the boy on the ground to kill this young boy. That's what the father said the intent of the spirit had been. Isn't it just like the enemy of our soul to want to kill, steal, and destroy and leave no shred of evidence of anything good without Jesus even having a chance to come and save and restore and deliver this young man? Well, the father says, if you can do anything, please do it. Have a heart. Have compassion on us. And Jesus says, if to anyone who believes, all things are possible. And so this father says, I believe, help my unbelief, or help me with my doubts. You know, what an honest dad to say that. I think sometimes Jesus just wants us to be honest with him. You doubt him? Tell him. Don't just sit back and say nothing. And then Jesus delivers this young man, lifts him up. Isn't that just like Jesus, to lift us up where Satan would throw us down? And then the disciples corner Jesus and say, why couldn't we deliver this boy? Why couldn't we drive out this spirit? And Jesus says, this kind only comes out by prayer. Folks, our first response should be, prayer should be our first response, not our last resort. I hope that this has challenged you the way it's challenged me. Thanks for being with me today. Bye.